Hello, Father Mark again for my really weekly little check-in chat. Hope everything is going well for everybody and that we're managing through the crisis we find ourselves in. I asked before we get into today's little discussion, just for your prayers for many folks who are really struggling this past week and dealing with some very difficult health circumstances, dealing with loved ones who are struggling with their health, things that were stable for a time now seem to have changed a bit, and life is getting difficult for some people. So when you're doing your daily prayers, just as I'm sure you're doing already, just keep those intentions in your mind and heart as well. I was reading a study that was done recently about Americans' reaction to the COVID coronavirus crisis that we're in. And it really underscored how most people are really experiencing real difficult mental health and stress levels, unlike anything they've reported before. The majority of Americans, describe themselves as being nervous, depressed, lonely, and hopeless. Those are very strong words, and words that we don't find ourselves using all too often in the normal course of life events. I was speaking with an older parishioner recently who said that, what we're going through now is very similar to what she experienced during World War II, but she put a little caveat on that, but it's much different. She remembers going through that time and having restrictions in terms of what she could buy, where she could go, being forced to stay home, being on alert. She said, but the one thing that we could do that we can't do now is we could always go to church. We could always be with people. You see, it's this physical distancing piece, which is really so different for us because we're hardwired and made to be with each other. And if anything, we're learning just how important that interaction and that community experience really is. We're also realizing how important our sacramental faith is and how really much we hunger for a connection to all of those things. Talking to a friend this past week reminded me of Dante's Inferno, a very interesting thing that I had forgotten about. In his description of hell, he images on the gates of hell a slogan that entails these words: abandon all hope. Think about the power of those words. Abandon all hope. So in other words, when you walk through the gates of hell, you have to leave behind all hope. Hope is such a strong motivator for us. It can see us through the darkest of moments. And we often find ourselves not focusing as uniquely and as intensively as we can on that virtue. We tend to see life as sometimes being hopeless. But is it really? And does it have to be? My memory went back to a story that I heard, I think it went back to 2014, about this woman. Her name was Magda Hertzberger. And she recounted her journey through the Nazi concentration camps. And she remembers that she was 18 years old in 1944, I believe, when she was taken and brought to the first of 3 concentration camps that she was forced to endure. And one of the awful jobs that she had to do, and had no choice obviously about, was being a corpse gatherer. Can you imagine the horror of that experience and what that can do to the soul of an individual? Well, what's remarkable about the story that Magda relays is that she always found, even in the midst of all of this struggle and hardship, the gift of grace and discovered hope. Discovered hope even in the darkness. And even through all of this upheaval of life, having to go through 3 concentration camps, she never lost that flame and light of hope within. She never lost the ability to love. And she details that her journey only could come full circle when she was able to find forgiveness. And I found that to be so incredibly powerful. I remember growing up as a kid, the woman living across the street was in a Nazi concentration camp. She had just married her husband in Poland. And maybe I think it was the day after they exchanged vows. They were separated from one another for over a year. And she used to share her stories with me. And they always left an impression on my young mind and heart. And so, yes, we're going through a difficult time. But in no way, shape, or form is it the end of the road. If we keep ourselves focused, we can endure anything. Viktor Frankl has a wonderful quote. He says, "Those who have a why to live can endure any how." So in other words, if the reason for our journeying, if the reason for our living is far greater than the circumstances around us, if we've developed this inner strength, this inner fortitude that comes from God's gift of hope, then regardless of the circumstances, we can see our way through that. So even though we have to endure a time of different and a time of difficult and a time of restriction and a time of anxiety and a time of worry, that the end of this is always something new. We can always overcome. We can always become the person God is always creating and recreating within us. There is always hope. And so it's good to listen to the stories of those who have walked journeys far greater than ours that we're going through right now, who've had to endure burdens and tragedies that are far greater than what we're enduring now. To see and to learn that as long as they kept centered, as long as they remained true, they found that they came out the other end in a better place. Crisis always has a two-edged deal going on. It's always an opportunity of danger, but it's always an opportunity. There's always a light, even when there's a dark. And so as we go about the business of our lives this week, don't let the flame of hope get extinguished. Don't ever find yourself at a point of deep despair. Always look within and see that you're being led, that you're being guided, that there's something more than the circumstances that are around us. There's even something more to this body that we've come to know and cherish. That even if this is taken away, our good God always makes sure that our true self, our inner soul, will always live and have a home. May God bless you. You have my thoughts, my prayers, and my love. Hopefully I will see you Sunday for our Eucharistic blessing after Mass. Please come by. And if you have the kids, love to see them as well. And please know that you're in my thoughts and prayers. God love you.